Yo, what is up, you guys? Today we are reacting to every Poppy Playtime monster explained. If you want to watch the real video without any pauses and stuff, you can go watch the full-length video. I'm going to put a link in the description. But let's get to it, I guess.
Today, I'm going to be explaining every Poppy Playtime monster in the entire game. All these guys you see on screen, over 50 different toys and all. The rules are, I'm only discussing Playtime Co. toys /
So even the small smiling critters, bro, that's going to take forever. I'm not watching the entire thing, though.
monsters, so no employees or obscure unknown experiments, at least for this video. And I'm going to explain each character roughly in order by when we encounter them in the game. But now, let's get into it, starting with Huggy Wuggy. Huggy Wuggy is the main villain in Chapter 1, starting originally as a toy plush created in 1984,
Dude, 1984 for that thing? It's crazy.
being generally a large success, taking inspiration from those monkey Velcro arm plushes, but this time as a fluffy blue monster. As an experiment, Experiment 1170, Huggy was created to be the Playtime Co. security guard, standing up at the top of the factory to attack and stop any would-be intruders from breaking in. However, he wasn't perfect, since Huggy, while generally being quiet and obedient with the staff, had multiple impulsions to try and escape the factory, being successful one of these times where he got outside and attacked multiple animals, employees, and was even spotted in a civilian area where he was finally
He got out? I never knew that he got out of the factory. That's actually crazy.
caught. In the actual game, the player encounters the statue, who is seemingly standing still and inanimate, but then after powering on the door, he mysteriously disappears and watches over us throughout the rest of the chapter, leading up to him finally revealing himself from a dark hallway and chasing us down a ventilation system.
Dude, that was terrifying. I hated not being able to talk during that stream, because I can't talk or else I'll get stream banned, because I'm too young or whatever, I don't know. But that was a crazy sequence, dude. He got cooked, falling down the catwalks and stuff. Dude, I'm surprised I didn't die. My heart was beating so fast because I knew when it was going to happen, too.
Where we successfully drop a box on his head, dropping him deep below the factory. But he wouldn't leave our minds, as we saw he fell below the water treatment area in Chapter 2, judged from his blood on the pipes. And in Chapter 3, the player had a nightmare about Huggy, where he comes through a TV screen and attacks us. Leading up to Chapter 4, where Huggy turned out to have actually survived the fall and was repaired from his damages.
Well, that's a spoiler warning. I didn't know that you could see his blood and stuff from the water treatment thing. I can't wait to be able to play Chapter 4. I don't know if I'll be able to, but I'm gonna beg to play Chapter 5 because it's all about the prototype and stuff. Stay tuned for that. I'll let you guys know if I'm allowed to get it or not.
Attacking us one more time on our way to the labs, coming back for more presumably in Chapter 5. Kissy Missy. Following the large release of Huggy Wuggy, Kissy Missy was created as a female recolored counterpart.
I know in the last stream that I just had, the first part of Chapter 3, I saw her in the bedroom crying at a picture. So I was wondering what that picture was, if it was her before the experiment or whatever. I'm pretty sure I heard something about that, but I don't really remember, so.
Colored counterpart to go alongside him and follow in his successful footsteps, being described as his better half, suggesting they were meant to be partners. As for her monster version, she was Experiment 1172, who, similar to Huggy, was very quiet and generally listened to the staff. However, she was also noted for having struggles with high levels of stress and feelings of impending doom, making her unable to complete any of her tasks, constantly rubbing her arms out of anxiety, leading her to temporarily be transported to Storage B, where later on August 8th, they tried to transport her to Playcare conveniently right before the Hour of Joy, an event coordinated by the prototype, who we talk about a lot later, to get all the toys to attack and kill every Playtime Co. employee, setting themselves free. Where in an unlikely fit, despite her peaceful attitude, she as well attacked the employees around her, possibly out of fear of what the prototype would do to her if she didn't listen. However, after the fact, in-game, we first see her in Chapter 2, where...
Oh, I remember this part from the Chapter 1 stream. Y'all remember it too? Okay.
Instead of being violent, she actually helps us, opening a gate allowing us to continue. And in chapter 3, while she ambushed and jumped on us out of fear at first on our way out of Home Sweet Home, she quickly calmed and continued the rest of our journey with us, seemingly still shaken up from the state of the factory, which would unfortunately culminate in chapter 3's ending with her being attacked by a mysterious creature, hurting but not killing her, as she would survive and return in the next chapter in a burned and injured state, being brought to the safe haven to treat her injuries. But after the ventilation area Poppy and her were hiding blew up at the end of chapter 4, she tried to hold us up and save us, where her arm ripped off, getting lost in the rubble, with her whereabouts remaining a mystery to this day. Bron the dinosaur. Bron the dinosaur is a Brontosaurus toy released in 1961, being one of Playtime Co.'s earliest creations. And along with appearing in a bunch of promos and posters, he has a couple physical appearances in the games as well. One, we can see him in chapter 1's original trailer, suggesting he was supposed to appear in it at one point. 2, we actually see him in the Rejected Toys room, one large, almost bigger body scale toy and a smaller one. Then in chapter 3, he appeared as bait in the original teaser trailer, although he did make a pretty important lore appearance in the Restricted Restoration VHS tape, where a Playtime Co. employee, Thomas Clark, contracted lung cancer and therefore donated his life to the science and let them try creating him into a small Bron toy, giving us our first and only footage of a character being operated on, even though it ended up being a failure, with him losing all cognitive function, even being almost murdered when put with the rest of the toys, since they likely knew he was an employee and not a child like the rest, causing them to attack. Although, fun fact, one of the Poppy Playtime writers has came out and...
That's crazy. That's actually creepy. I didn't even know he was actually a part of the lore. It's wild.
Said that he, along with a Boogie Bot, had plans to be much bigger in the game. Really? So that explains his lack of a bigger body or anything. And speaking of which, next is Candy Cat. Candy Cat was created in 1979 and is again another relatively minor side character who is used mostly for art and promotion filler, but doesn't really...
Yeah, I fed that thing way too much in chapter 2. Thing said, no more candy.
Appear much physically in the game. Although, judged from her design and behind the scenes, we can assume her toy is meant to be a gumball dispenser that would move around on wheels and dispense candy.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Who would buy that? Why would you want a moving gumball dispenser? Who wants a gumball? Goodbye. Like, what?
The tail was pulled. Catbee. Catbee is another not very well-known character who appears as more of a filler toy throughout chapter 1, only making a couple of minor appearances here and in future games. On her box, she was apparently the first of 5 of the Kitty Cat collection, whatever that is, likely along with Candy Cat, and was also the first known Swapamal, which is a Playtime Co. line of toys where the different characters' body parts can be attached and detached around as pleased. In the chapter 2 ARG, where they revealed the full design for Mommy Longlegs, they also had a living Catbee that was seen on the floor here before being dragged away and bloodied. Plus, in behind the scenes, we saw what appears to be...
What is that? Thing looks like a friggin' cicada. Look at it.
Plans for a monster version of Catbee, although what happened to this is currently unknown. The Prototype. The Prototype is the main villain of the entire game and was one of the earliest experiments, 1006, who actually does appear in chapter 1, scratched into the wall of the power room here, and even though we don't physically see him until later chapters, I'm talking about him now because he is important for like basically every other character's story. So what made the Prototype unique in his creation is, unlike many of the other experiments at the time that failed because they had no mental cognition, couldn't move, or didn't live very long, the Prototype failed because he was actually far too intelligent and too agile, along with other weird quirks like that he didn't need to eat food in order to survive.
Who was the Prototype? Like, maybe he'll tell us.
Unlike the others, making him a super interesting test subject for the employees. His only issue was that he was extremely violent towards the workers, having instances where he would literally break his camera and hide away in his containment cell until an employee entered to check on him so he could kill them. However, most importantly, after spending a long time witnessing all of the experimentation going on around him, he wanted to start a revolution, gathering all the monsters together to create the previously mentioned Hour of Joy, where every monster all at once on August 8th attacked every single adult human being in the factory, from employees to tour guides to actual guests. Nobody was spared in this event, and it was all in the prototype's plans to try and get revenge for creating these organic beasts out of children and other human beings out of their will. However, following this attack, all of these toys were left without a leader and without any kind of way to eat or stay alive. The prototype took advantage of this by taking over the power the employees once held and created his very own cult. The toys could either go under his control and worship and listen to his orders, awarding them with food and protection, or they could revolt against him and be deemed heretics. Although the way 1006 gave his worshippers food was by capturing the heretics and then feeding them to the followers, taking full control of the factory and the toys still inside, who we are trying to stop throughout the entirety of the game. And as we move throughout the chapters, defeating the enemies put in front of us, he begins to collect their remains as well for a mysterious purpose. Culminating in chapter 4 when we learn that the prototype was after our collaborator Poppy Playtime, attempting to corner us and put her back in the case that he originally put her in after the Hour of Joy. Which perfectly brings us to the next character, Poppy Playtime. Poppy Playtime is of course the main title character and what the entire game generally revolves around. She was created in 1950 by the one and only Elliot Ludwig, a family man with a wife and daughter and founder of all of the factory, being the first toy that we know of to be a success and launch Playtime Co. into the mainstream, selling tons of the Poppy Playtime doll, allowing them to create the rest of the toys we see following in her footsteps. The toy itself was basically just a retro doll that could talk, and that's really all. Its flagship feature was that the hair of Poppy smelled like poppy flowers, which would relax the children playing with it, inspiring later plush designs we talk about in this.
That's creepy, like poppy flowers putting you to sleep, and then you like pull Catnap's tail or whatever, and then you just like and stuff, and he just like put you to sleep. That's creepy. I would not want that toy.
Video. However, what makes her story interesting is inside Playtime Co. there was a version of her that was actually alive, made of organic material. As Elliot Ludwig, while working tirelessly on the factory to make it successful, ended up losing his wife to a divorce due to the long hours, with his daughter, the last piece of his family, passing away for an unknown reason, causing him to use all of his ingenuity skills from working at Playtime Co. to desperately try to revive his daughter as one of the dolls, which actually ended up working perfectly, creating the living, breathing Poppy we know today.
Wait, so Stella was his daughter? Unless Stella isn't Poppy. Because I thought Stella Graver was Poppy.
Which then he would build a facade of a home right outside of his factory so he could visit his daughter while at work as if his family was still there. However, Elliot Ludwig would eventually pass, and other employees like Leith Pierre and in the future Harley Sawyer would take over, leaving them with this super cool, almost magical doll, but they didn't know how they were created and their creator was no longer there to explain. So they spent the next while studying the doll, taking her apart and reverse engineering her to figure out what was on the inside, eventually using the discovered technology to create all of the other toys based on their other products. However,
that is creepy as heck.
Unlike Mommy Longlegs. Mommy Longlegs is the main villain of Chapter 2 and protector of the game station.
Mommy Longlegs is so creepy, bro.
A toy, she was created in 1991 with the highly coveted elastic plastic, being inspired by the real-life toy Betty Spaghetti, with her main selling point being that she could stretch long distances. However, interestingly, the toy version of her they sold was actually based on an experiment they already made inside of Playtime Co. Experiment 1222, where she originally started off as a child in play care named Marie Payne, who was eventually experimented on to be turned into the stretchy spider-like pink creature, generally being a success, being able to move and talk normally, almost like a human, which they loved enough to make a whole toy off of her, but struggled specifically with her personality. She was very protective of all of the children, and
I thought it was a grown woman. It's crazy that it's a kid that's taking care of other kids like a mother.
experiments, presumably out of empathy for what they had to go through, while she hated the employees, frequently being violent with them when in sight. So they moved her to the game station itself, where her job was to take care of all of the children while they were being tested in the various mini games, and the scientists examined above from afar. In game though, with us being an employee, her temperament is what gets the best of her, because in her pursuit of trying to get us killed through the game station games that we survive, she gets extremely frustrated, eventually causing her to go on a rampage and get stuck in a shredder, which is where she dies and gets scooped up by the prototype.